My name is Benny Lakunishok. I'm a senior product manager for ATA. For those of you, let's ask, how many of you are familiar with ATA? Okay, familiar as in deployed it or familiar as in about to deploy it? Okay, cool. So good timing then. So I was part of the original Aurato startup, cybersecurity startup that was acquired 2 years ago and is now ATA. So for those of you who don't know, let's give a quick overview before I do some demos. So basically the problem that ATA is set out to solve is to detect in advanced threats and insider threats. Another problem that we set out to solve is the fact that most cybersecurity solutions really are very noisy, alert a lot of false positive, all of that. So putting those two problems together of having advanced attackers and having a lot of noise from various solutions that already exist, it's kind of hard to actually catch the attackers and actually do something with that. Some more information about the problem. So, and again, I'm assuming everybody here knows this. Assume breached. A lot of these advanced attacks, or most of them, have compromised credentials involved. So things like pass the ticket and pass the hash. And they are usually many months in the organization without you knowing that. So that's the layout of how these advanced attacks look like. So this is the attack kill chain as we see it. It's compromised of basically 3 stages. We have the reconnaissance stage, okay? Things like some are network session enumeration, DNS reconnaissance, Active Directory is a big part of that, of course. Then other forms of reconnaissance, we can talk about that later if you want. Then the yellow part, which is the lateral movement cycle. It's all about going laterally in the network, jumping from one device to one machine to one laptop to one server, and basically each time you do that, you get exposed to more credentials that sit on that machine that are logged on, and then you get those and you have more. And when you have more, statistically you can log on more machines and get an admin access on more and more machines, all the way to domain admin. And then you're at the domain dominance phase, this red one here. And actually, in the past, we thought that once you have domain admin, it's game over. But that's not actually the case. Once you get domain admin, you actually have tons of other things you can do, like create a golden ticket, so that it will be persistent forever if you want. And it's very hard, by the way, to, once you have golden ticket, first of all, it's very hard to detect. Like, nobody else can detect it like we do, and I'll explain why in about 5-10 minutes. But once you have that, that's very hard to kick them out. And then other things that can happen in that domain dominance phase, like DP API attack. I don't know if you heard about that, but basically, once you have domain admin rights and you have malicious intent, you can open all of the stored secrets on all of the devices in the organization. For example, in the browser, when you save the credentials for Facebook or your bank account or whatever the case may be, an attacker can get all of those. So other attack vectors are in that area as well. And obviously getting the crown jewels, right? So if the attacker is there for getting credit card information or just to get the list of all of the customers for that particular organization, or the intellectual property of that organization, that's also here in the domain dominance phase. And ATA, so there are, by the way, a couple of stages before that, of course, external recon, phishing email campaigns, getting a foothold inside the organization, so compromising machines, right? So ATA doesn't detect that. We focus on the reconnaissance, lateral movement cycles, and domain dominance. And obviously after that, there's the exfiltration of the data that the attacker wants. We also don't detect that. We don't deal with exfiltrations. We focus mainly in the major parts of the attack itself that take a long time to do. Generally speaking, that was the attack kill chain for how advanced attack looked like. Generally speaking, the solution for the advanced attacks and insider threat issue or problems is the UEBA market, user and entity behavioral analytics. And there are, by the way, many competitors over here and over the South booth that are in this new market space that Gartner announced about a year ago. We'll talk about a bit what differentiates us from the UEBA competitors, but basically UEBA, generally speaking, is a continuation of the SIEM in some ways, although they are very different. So SIEMs are not good at detection. It's not what they do. That's why you're starting to see more and more next generation SIEMs and SIEM vendors that are actually also acquiring UBA players so that they would have an add-on on top of their SIEMs. UEBA does detect, and again, some of them do it in a good way, some they do it not so good way. I'll talk about the differentiation in that area for us. Detecting compromised credentials, so UEBA is supposed to be very good. Actually, many vendors do it too good, so they are too noisy. Then they have a lot of false positives, but SIEM don't do that at all. Alert volume, again, SIEM is not so good, UEBA better. Log aggregation, so UEBA is not meant to be your log aggregation or the framework where you do the forensics and investigation. That's, traditionally speaking, more the SIEM. Compliance monitoring, again, SIEM, not a UEBA solution. And yeah. And we are seeing this trend where SIEM vendors, let's say Splunk, right? They bought Caspida. Now they have a UEBA solution on top of their SIEM. And the other way around, where we are seeing more UEBA players say, understanding that customers want that log retention, aggregation for investigation and other purposes, and compliance. So we are starting to see UEBA players, us included, moving down more that path of being that aggregator of information. So what's ATA? ATA is basically a UEBA platform to detect, prioritize, and investigate advanced attacks and insider threat. How we do that, by the way, we're an on-prem solution that basically uses 3 data sources. We use Active Directory traffic, so either port mirror or domain controllers in your organization to one of our components called the gateway that collects all of the traffic and sends that to our second component called the center. That's the brains of the operation, where all the profiling happens, machine learning, deterministic detection, etc. Or, which is rather new, we can also install that gateway component on top of the domain controller and get the traffic locally, so you don't need to port mirror. So either the out-of-band experience or the agent-based, let's call it, approach. So network traffic from the domain controller is our #1 data source. And when you think about it, why did we target that data source as the main data source? Is because whatever you do in the network, when you log on in the morning, when you open a file share, when you access a file share, open Outlook, access your mailbox, whatever it is you do, you need to authenticate and get authorized to do something against that resource. So by looking just at that top of the pyramid, the domain controller, I know what everybody's doing. All of the entities, I know what they're doing without needing to have agents all over the place, all over the endpoints. I don't need that, right? So it's a very good one. Second one is events. So we, at the moment, get events from domain controllers to enrich some of our detections. And in the future, we are looking to add, very near future actually, more events, for example, VPN, so we can get to see what's happening from the external vector as well. And the third one is Active Directory itself. We just see all of the relations between the entities, who has group membership where, so things like that. So those are the 3 data sources that we have. And everything is installed on-prem. So something that differentiates us, I guess, from most UEBA competitors is that we have 2 sets of detection engines. We have the machine learning, that everybody's doing that, right? It's a buzzword. Wherever you go here, you'll hear, oh, we're doing machine learning. Okay, cool. Or some sort of behavioral analytics, right? Now, most competitors, when they want to detect pass the ticket, which is, stealing a Kerberos ticket created from a logon session in one machine, stealing that to another machine, that's a very small deviation to detect with using machine learning. Because of that, the threshold for their machine learning algorithms are very low, and due to that, it's very noisy. They alert on every small deviation, no matter how small. They try to, filter out the noise, but eventually they would just have a lot of alerts that you need to look at. we took the approach, and again, this is mainly due to the fact that we chose network traffic as our main data source. There are most of the things that we do from network traffic is not doable in terms of detections from events, from what you have in SIEMs traditionally. We have a set of, so the first detection engine is the machine learning that we have. But alongside that, we have a set of deterministic detections, set of 20 or more now. Each version is growing more and more to detect everything in the attack kill chain. So all of the various reconnaissance in the first stage, so DNS reconnaissance, Active Directory reconnaissance, SAMR, network session enumeration, all of that. Then lateral movement, so we detect past the ticket, past the hash, over past the hash, all of those. Brute force, various flavors, horizontal, vertical. And then the domain dominance phase, so golden ticket, DPA API attack, forge pack, I don't know if you heard about that, so, and others. So we have a deterministic set of detections for each of those. So we don't need machine learning for those. You install us, for minute zero, basically for most of those detections, we detect. And because of that, our machine learning has a higher threshold. So only for real things that are very, very noisy that's happening. Let's say the Snowden case, that's a classical insider threat, right? He accessed tens of new file servers that he didn't do before in order to copy tons of data. So that's something that's really abnormal, and we will only alert on those. So it's that combination that allows us, first of all, to detect many things in the attack kill chain, and alongside that, while detecting that, having a very low ratio of false positive versus actual positives. So just to name some of our key strengths against competitors mainly is smarter detections. Just as I said, we have those two. We have a team of security researchers in our product group that are dedicated to finding what's the new attacks that we are starting to see out there, what are the new attack vectors, and we are always adding and enhancing more deterministic detections to answer all of those. And that security research team and all of our engineers, by the way, are heavily focused on making sure that the quality is the maximum that we have in the industry, and even better than that in terms of false positive. We don't release algorithms before we test that, and even if we do, we always release an update to make sure that the false positive ratio is as low as possible. So smarter detections is something we take high pride in. Contextual deep packet inspection. So what does that mean? It basically means that we parse the network traffic, get all the way to layer 7, get all of the interesting bits in the traffic that we see. For example, in Kerberos, who is the source account, what types of encryption are used, things of that nature. So we do deep packet inspection. You will hear for some competitors they are doing network traffic, but they're only doing layer 4, or they're not doing deep contextual parsing of the traffic. So that's another key differentiator or key strength. After we do that parsing, and again, a lot of competitors, they say, okay, something happened from that IP address to that IP address. That is not interesting. So we have some patents on how to resolve those IP addresses in real time to the entities behind them. So that's Benny's laptop, that's your machine, that's that server name. When you detect past the ticket, for example, if my machine, if I'm on a Wi-Fi now and I close the machine and open it again on another Wi-Fi, I'll get 2 IP addresses. So if you see a Kerberos ticket, my Kerberos ticket, that's being used from one IP address and then on another IP address, that doesn't mean that passed the ticket. That means that my machine moved from one IP address to another IP address, right? So we have to have a very solid way to make sure who is behind that IP address, which entity, Benny's laptop in that example. And we have a few patents on that. It's a very complicated and well thought out architecture on how to do that. And that's another key differentiator here. And lastly, and there are other strengths, but these are the main ones, plug and play. So our mantra is that you don't need to configure anything. It's actually all the way to the extreme that some of our customers, after they install us, and you basically deploy, and that's it. You don't configure anything. All of the detections work. The machine learning start to work. Everything. You don't configure anything, except if you want to get email notifications. So you need to specify your email. We can't guess that. But basically, the policies, thresholds, all of that, you don't need to configure anything. Some of our customers even give me a chance to modify something because I don't have that. it's that extreme that we don't want anyone to play with the thresholds and policies. It's that good. It's that easy to play with. Cool. So with that, let's do a quick demo of how all of this looks. So this is a demo environment that we have internally. It basically has previous versions of the product, actually. And this is how we visualize the detections. When we detect something, we have this box over here. It's called the suspicious activity or alert or event, whatever you want to call it. And this specific one is an identity theft using Pass the Ticket. Everything is interactive. So you can go and click on administrator, for example, and get a look on where that administrator logged on, what resource he recently accessed, some password details, colleague details if filled. For example, let me search for someone who has maybe more details. So colleague details, Active Directory site information. In the future, we'll have also VPN sites and worldwide map of where that user is being used, group membership, Active Directory information, what suspicious activities is this entity involved in, and any directory changes that were made to that entity. So let's have a look at this entity. Entity is not just a user, it's also computers or servers. In this specific case, this is a terminal server for external vendors for that specific company. And as you can see, these are the users logging on. Resource access, the same thing. Here we'll also have some IP address information and some other things. What's interesting is to actually show the attack timeline. This attack timeline, before we had the general organizational attack timeline. This is a private attack timeline that's basically from the point of reference, from this specific entity point of reference. So all of the suspicious activities or alert that this entity was involved in. And you can see from the beginning that we had a honey token activity. So honey token is actually the only detection that requires a configuration for you to say who is that honey token user or account. And you usually fabricate a user, super user, SQL admin, something that nobody would use, and an attacker would then try and log on with that account or brute force, and we would alert, and then we would know something is happening that shouldn't be. So that's the honey token. Following that, we see reconnaissance using account enumeration, and you see that 102 accounts were non-existing, and 3 accounts were existing. So now the attacker knows that there are 3 accounts he can try and play with. This is not brute force. This is just the existence of an account in the organization. And by the way, this attack and many others don't even leave a trace in the event logs. So there's nothing to look at the SIEM, and even that UEBA solution that was bought for that SIEM doesn't make any sense because it doesn't leave any trace in the event logs. That's how some of these advanced attacks work. So that's account enumeration, and after discovering those 3 accounts, now the attacker has brute forced one of them and potentially guessed, because we saw a successful authentication in that burst of failed authentication. And following that, that user, and this is the output of the machine learning. That's the only alert we have for the machine learning. All the rest are deterministic. Following that, Michael Dubinsky's account started to behave abnormally. So normally he's logging on Michael's laptop and Michael's desktop. But abnormally, he logged on more machine, and also for resources. So he logged on these machines abnormally. Shared admin SRV and some others. And following that, from that shared admin SRV, sorry about that he just logged on to abnormally, because it's not his account anymore. It's the one that the attacker that brute forced his account is using his account on his behalf. And he's basically stealing the administrator Kerberos ticket using pass the ticket technique to external vendor terminal server, right? And then after that, using that domain admin administrator Kerberos ticket from the external vendor terminal server to perform remote execution against the domain controller. Sometimes we know exactly what was executed, sometimes not depending on the protocol. That's also something we are also always adding. So that's how we basically tell the story of an attack as it unfolds. And this can happen over many, many months, by the way. So that's basically it for the overview. Any questions? Feel free. Yeah. Can you come closer a bit? Sorry, I can't hear. I'll repeat the question.
How common is it that a brute force attack would happen in an Active Directory domain that has account lockout enabled? So in that scenario, is brute force on passwords?
That's a great question. So the question was how often or what's the likelihood of an attacker to perform brute force in a domain where account lockout is existing. So obviously that decreases the chance greatly. But two things. A, most organizations are moving away from account lockouts for various operational reasons of a lot of accounts locking out without being attacked from that perspective. And two, attackers can also, if they're already inside, they can see, let's say, I'm authenticating successfully, they can capture that, and for the 5 minutes that Kerberos allows for that time replay, they can brute force till the configured amount, let's say 10, so they could brute force 9. It only takes one more to lock out, and then they send that packet of successful authentication, and that resets the counter. And they can do that, and our security research actually caught that before the acquisition, actually. And then we told Microsoft before the acquisition. And basically in those 5 minutes, you can brute force potentially thousands of passwords. So if you're doing a dictionary attack of common passwords, you can still do that even with the account lockouts. But that's a good question, yeah. Oh, come on, don't be shy. You can ask anything, really. Yeah. Yeah. Okay. So you're asking about service account, but what's the question?
You were saying that you saw an account there, like SharePoint something admin account.
Yeah.
Should be interactively logging in by a human. How are you detecting that? What are you flagging?
So the question is about service accounts or privileged account like administrator that should be used differently. You said it shouldn't be logging on interactively, and I say that in most organizations that's actually fine, but it's in a specific pattern. It's only originating from specific machines, only in specific times maybe. It's a different pattern, I'll give you that. So our machine learning is basically aimed to catch those types of things. So if that's a privileged account, we treat it differently than any other account. That's how we do that. Any other questions? Okay, so I'll stay here for the next 5-10 minutes. Thanks, and enjoy RSA.